My father died about 5 years ago unexpectedly from a heart attack. To say it was hard on my mother and I was an understatement. Our old house in Knoxville just didn't feel like home anymore. About a year later, Mom and I made plans to take ourselves and our elderly dog Ace on a move further down south, to a small town situated about half an hour from Atlanta. Just a few days before the move, however, I had one of the most vivid dreams I've ever come to experience. All that was within my dream was my bedroom, a picture-perfect recreation of the real thing. I sometimes wonder if I was in some sort of sleep paralysis state when it occurred. To further add to the dream's realism, in the middle of the night, the streetlights right across the street would illuminate through my window, creating a light reflection on the wall perpendicular. In my dream, as I lay there staring at that exact reflection on the wall, I saw an orb of smoke fade in from the shadows. Goosebumps chilled across my skin as I lay there panicked and afraid to move a muscle. Suddenly, it stopped moving and steadily hung in the light's reflection as if it was staring at me. Without warning, it spoke to me in my dead father's voice. "I'm sending something to watch you." Despite hearing my father's voice come from the orb, I was terrified of it. I didn't know why, and yet I managed to squeak out a small reply towards it. "What?" The orb remained silent for a few moments, leaving an eerily dead silence in the voice's place. And just as quickly, it spoke to me one final time. "Damn black." I woke up almost instantaneously, gasping for breath. The nightmare had chilled me to my core. I didn't know exactly what to make of it, especially the two final words. I chalked it up to maybe Dad wishing us well on our move, but at that time, I just couldn't shake the feeling it was some kind of a warning. Within the next couple weeks, my mother and I moved out of Knoxville and headed down south to Georgia. She had managed to find a quaint little house for us, with only one or two neighbors down a gravel road in the middle of the woods. It was a nice fit for us, and probably the best reliever of all the stress that came with the move was our new neighbor's cat. She was a petite older black cat that gravitated towards me almost instantly, and I treated her as if she was my own pet. I left out a can of food once or twice a week for her, and even if I didn't call out for her, when she saw me outside, she would always run up to me. She helped ease my tensions about leaving Knoxville behind, especially without Dad being there. Less than a month into our new house, I awoke suddenly to a faint coughing noise that sounded like it was coming from downstairs. One important thing to know about our dog Ace is that he has a collapsed trachea. He needs medicine to help calm the condition, so I'm used to waking up in the middle of the night to give him his medicine. I proceeded downstairs from my bedroom to give him his cough medicine, but I couldn't find him anywhere throughout the house. He wasn't in his bed sleeping, he wasn't in the kitchen, he was nowhere to be found. I didn't check Mom's bedroom, however, to avoid waking her up. Besides, I wouldn't have heard the coughing if he had been in there anyways, so I just let it be. That's when I heard the cough again, but it was coming from further away, as if from outside. I looked over at the side patio door leading out into the woodlands, and realized I had forgotten to shut it. There it stood, slightly ajar. Shit, I thought to myself. He got out. I immediately ran outside with a flashlight and started calling out for my dog. I shouted into the neighboring trees. I heard another cough and I shined my light in its direction. That time it had echoed from down the gravel road. I swear a path had never looked so terrifyingly desolate before in my life, as I stared down the same gravel road that had led us to our new home. But at that moment, I thought my dog was lost, and I chalked it up to my new house jitters. So I pressed onwards. "Ace, come on boy, home's this way, buddy." That's when I heard it. The cough that I had been following almost right beside me. But this time, it didn't stay like the dry cough I had been hearing. Instead, the cough had slowly descended into a low growl. I shined my light towards the new sound. There stood a bright red fox in the middle of the path. For a moment, I figured it was some kind of sick fox I had mistaken for my dog. The whole time as I was processing what I was seeing, it stared directly at me. Its eyes glowed from the light of my flashlight. However, our stare broke when it tilted its head to the right. I looked down, and there she was. Our neighbor's little black cat standing beside me. However, it was as if she had completely changed her persona. She was no longer the happy, affectionate cat I had come to know. Instead, she had her back arched upright, and every fiber of her hair standing at attention, and uttered the lowest growl I had ever heard come out of a feline. At that moment, I figured she was just scared of the fox, so I knelt down beside her in a bid to coax her away and avoid the fox hurting her. But no matter how many times I tried to coax her out of fight mode, she wouldn't budge. Her stare remained unfazed. That's when I looked towards the direction of the fox once more, but there wasn't a fox standing there anymore. Instead, in the same exact spot of the gravel road, was a walking, rotting corpse of a roadkill coyote slowly moving towards me. I took a step back, absolutely horrified by what I was seeing. Its jaw was hanging loose from its face, one of its eyes was stained with blood, and it wobbled back and forth, as if it was desperately fighting pain. I rubbed my eyes out of disbelief, hoping I was imagining it, but it was still there when my eyes reopened. Despite the gruesome sight before us, our neighbor's black cat, no matter how tiny she was, stood there and kept growling at the creature. Suddenly, it stopped. The creature has ceased its walk towards us. For a moment it just stood there, glancing back and forth between myself and this little black cat that was trying to defend me. That's when I unmistakably heard this beast mutter two solemn words in a low, gravelly voice. Damn black. In a flash, the creature ran straight into the woods. I shined my flashlight in its direction, but it had completely vanished. Even the brush it had run through looked untouched. That's when the cat, still standing beside me, calmed herself down. Almost as if nothing had happened, she rubbed herself up against my leg, returning to her normal loving mood. Despite technically not being mine, I proceeded to scoop her up and run back into the house. Before heading upstairs with the little black cat snuggled up in my arms, I decided to poke my head into my mother's room. Laying on the floor, sound asleep, was Ace. He had been there the entire time. I quietly closed her door before bolting upstairs. I made sure that little cat slept with me in my bed that night. From the research I've done, I think I was almost the victim of some kind of skinwalker. It must have picked up the sounds my dog sometimes makes late at night, knowing I'll likely come to his aid. For whatever reason, our neighbor's black cat had scared it so badly it scrambled away. I haven't seen it since that night, maybe because the same cat still likes to wander down the gravel road at night, or maybe that thing just decided it wasn't worth the trouble. Either way, whether I have my father or pure luck to thank, I leave a can of food out every single night for that little black cat, and the most ironic part of it all, the cat's name is Halloween. My grandfather told me a story once as we sat around a campfire in his backyard in the cool night of the Arizona desert. The horizon was clear and each star twinkled in a purple sky with a full moon hanging low over the mountains. His voice was raspy and gravelly, the result of a lifetime of smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. The fire danced and shined across his wide dark eyes as he settled into his seat ready to tell his story. Way back when I was a boy, about your age, he began, I lived outside an Apache reservation with your great-grandfather. He had returned from the war and set about raising horses and cattle on a 100-acre ranch settled between brambly mountainside. One night my mother was sick, and Pa and I took a trip into town about 50 miles away, straight through a dry desert over a washed-out creek and some old abandoned farmsteads. The fire sparked and a log cracked, jolting me out of the story. What next? I asked. Settle down, boy, you'll hear soon enough. Pa and I were driving in an old Ford pickup truck. I remember it was dark out, inky and thick, and with only lights of our old truck lighting up the road. I remember too when the engine began to sputter and the truck slowed to a jerky stop. God damn it, Pa said, guiding the Ford to the side of the road as it coasted to a halt. Stay here, son, as he stepped out into the darkness, shutting the door with a heavy thud. My window was down and the cool desert air was breezy and felt good on my hot face and neck. Pa was getting water from the back to cool the engine, and that's when I smelled it. Rotten eggs. Strange, I thought, to smell sulfur in the desert. My nose also picked up carrion, like one of them dead bloated cattle that would drop from the heat and lay there until the crows pecked enough holes in their hide to cause the whole thing to explode. It stunk, and I gagged. My skin started to tingle too, the back of my neck felt itchy and my face started to get hot. The wind stopped blowing and hung still and heavy, with the stink filling the cab. Pa? I called. Pa! Pa! No answer. My heart started beating and I felt such a fear in me, in my bones, in my chest. Boy, I tell you, I've never felt fear like this. Not until Vietnam. Not until I saw men dying around me. I locked the door and reached over for my pa's door and saw a shadow bound across the road, through both dim beams of light across the partly open domed hood. Grandfather paused. He spit a fat wad of tobacco, spit it off to his side, and he looked pensively into the darkness. I realized I was holding my breath and gasped for air. The night was cool, but I was sweating and clammy. Well, what happened? What about your father? What did you see? He sighed. A creature. He shook his head. You have to understand. There were legends, older than the rock cairns out in the valley, older still than Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, than the old Injun chiefs and their shamans, the Apache, the Hopi, the Cherokee, and all them old tribes and First Peoples. They told tales, old stories, about dark Injun magic. A deal made with the old spirits of blood sacrifice to gain power, old power, enough to fight each other and the Spaniards, and later the white men that came for their land and women. They called them. He paused. Grandfather took a deep breath and bodied forward into his tale, across the fire and sky, the desert, the creek, the moon, the sun, and old mountains. He bodied forward. They called them skinwalkers, shape changers, old warriors resurrected as skinless men, all sinew and muscle, walking on deer legs with the torso of a man and the head of a coyote. But messed up boy, long and malformed snouts, teeth like a bowie knife, long arms and standing 7 foot, even hunched over. They got the old cowboys and white riders. They run through bullets and sabers, part the Spanish armor like it was a potato sack. Wily too. They could change their voice to match a person you knew or might know. Boy, that's what I saw. Big and fast, only for a second it ran across the road. Gray and mottled, muscle flexing under its legs, hooves clamping on the road, stringy muscled hunched shoulders, and it turned. Looked right into the cab, looked right into my eyes, and I swear, boy, I swear it grinned at me. I sank into my seat in shock, in fear, shaking. I knew death was near. The air was electric. I smelled ozone and brimstone. The air felt like right before the lightning came and blew a tree to smithereens, charged and full with power. I yelled for my pa, but no words came out, just a dry squeak. I was shaking as grandfather told his story. He was still there, so I knew he lived. But the supernatural always fascinated me. Even now, I felt the force of his words. The real power of skinwalkers was trickery. Sure, they could change their voices, but also their skin. That's why the gods took their hide, so they could take others. Not for long, the legends say. Maybe an hour before the soul of the skin they wore would come looking for their mortal shell before going to whatever hell awaited them. Though I think that getting skinned alive was hell enough. A minute passed in what felt like a lifetime, 1 second in 1,000 years. My father's door opened, and I jerked my head to the left, putting my fists up to fend off attack. "Son, it's me," my father said before climbing into the cab. He grasped the steering wheel and pulled himself in awkwardly, jerking himself into the seat. I cringed into the corner. I looked at him. I looked hard. "Boy, your great-grandfather was a good man. Treated me and my ma right. He fought the Nazis and saw the worst of man in Poland when he freed all them camps, and now I was taking his measure. Is this my father? Do I make a run or do I die? Is it him or not? Let's go get that medicine for your ma," as he pulled the truck into gear and pulled it out onto the road, and our trip resumed. I guess it was him after all. But how did you know? Was it because he said something about your mom? No, boy. I knew because out the window, out of the corner of my eye, I saw that beast running 50 miles an hour right next to the car, looking at me with yellow eyes and a grinning mouth. I looked, and I saw it, hunched and angry, running next to us, boy. My pa kept his eyes on the road, looked straight forward. "Son," he said, "don't look at it. Don't look at it." That's how I knew, boy. Let me start off by saying that my wife doesn't believe in paranormal entities or anything of that nature. We have 3 cats, and one of them likes to be a rebel, jumping onto counters and meowing at the top of his lungs, just looking for attention. He does this throughout the night, and it's a regular occurrence. Last night, after a few beers and video games, I decided it was time to head to bed with my wife. When I woke up this morning, my wife was basically attached to me, with wide eyes and a nervous look on her face. I asked her what was wrong, and she proceeded to tell me what happened last night. She said that around 2:50 in the morning, she was woken to a noise that sounded like one of our cats downstairs, meowing unusually loud. After giving herself a few seconds to perk up and fully pay attention, she said that the meows sounded more like a person trying to mimic a cat, and it kept saying hello. After meowing for 2 or 3 minutes, a loud bang came at our door, and then a notification went off for the motion sensor at our front door. When she told me this, I checked my phone, and sure enough, there was a notification for motion detected at 2:52 a.m. I asked her why she didn't wake me up so I could grab my gun. She said she was frozen with fear and didn't want it to hear her make a noise. We're out running errands while I'm typing this, but something made me uncomfortable about her story. Last night I set the home security alarm around 9 p.m. and we didn't turn it off until we walked the dog this morning. To make things worse, we had slept with all of the animals in the room and the door was closed, so whatever was in our house or outside the front door was not one of our animals. Obviously, the first thing that came to my mind was a skinwalker, but maybe I'm just being paranoid. I checked all the rooms in the house after I got up. I'm not sure what I could have done anyways. It's very odd that my wife was scared so badly by something she doesn't necessarily believe in. We bought this house brand new, so no one has lived here before, but when I'm home alone, I do feel like I'm being watched, or someone's walking directly behind me. My wife also said that the house has given her chills since she moved in. Something is just off about this house. We just got home and I went to hang up one of my shirts in the master bedroom closet when I noticed that the board that covers the attic access has been shifted a little. When I asked my wife about it, she said she's never been up there and the builders would have placed it back in its original place before we made the purchase. I'm genuinely getting anxious just thinking about what could be going on. Has anyone had an experience like this, or similar at least? We're going to my mother-in-law's to get some sage. My wife said burning it should keep whatever's around our house away.